I could describe Barbados in 3 words, I'd say fish, fun, and dreary. And you'll find out exactly why that is if you keep watching this video. But just to give you a little teaser, we're going to trace this island's incredible journey from an empty coral rock to a world-class republic, uncovering how unique its geography is and how inviting their culture is. Are you ready? Now, the story of Barbados begins as early as 1600 BCE. That's when early people from South America might have first settled here. Later on, between about 500 and 1500 CE, groups like the Arawak and the Carib people lived on the island, which wasn't called Barbados yet. They called it Ichiruganime. So their lives continued to flourish in the years that followed, until the early 1500s, when the Europeans arrived. First the Spanish, then the Portuguese. And it wasn't all good. Spanish slave raids in the 16th century pretty much depopulated the island. The indigenous people who managed to escape either fled or were captured. Then there was the Portuguese, who, by the way, were the ones who gave the island the name we know today, Barbados, which means bearded ones. And you want to know why? Some sources say it's because of the long drooping roots of the fig trees, and others believe that it refers to the men they saw. Either way, by the mid-16th century, the island was basically empty. European explorers figured it was too small and too far out of the way, so they lost interest. Imagine a completely pristine, unpopulated tropical island. That empty status didn't last forever though, because in 1627, an English ship called the William and John landed a small group of settlers, about 80 Englishmen and 10 Africans. And just like that, the British era began. In those first years, things were tough. They tried growing all sorts of crops like cotton and tobacco, but nothing was a huge moneymaker. They even set up a mini-government in 1639, complete with an assembly, which was pretty modern for the time, but the real game changer arrived in the 1640s, and it was the sweet, sweet discovery of sugar. So with help from the Dutch, the colonists figured out how to grow and refine sugarcane, and suddenly small family farms were being bought up and merged into huge sugarcane plantations. But, as with all other histories, this sugar revolution came at a cost. Because to run these huge profitable plantations, the rich white planters made a devastating decision. They brought in thousands of enslaved men, women, and children from West Africa. And that was when the whole society changed. So come the 1640s, there were 37,000 white settlers and 6,000 blacks, according to Britannica Encyclopedia. But by 1684, there were only about 20,000 whites and a staggering 46,000 blacks. And by the time slavery was abolished in 1834, the majority of the population, which was around 88,000 people, were of African descent. But between the 1600s and mid-1800s, Barbados became what's called a plantocracy. And this basically means that a small group of white planters held all the power and wealth. People resisted, of course, with acts of defiance and a major rebellion in 1816. But the planters' power was simply too strong at the time. Even after slavery ended, sugar still ruled, and life remained difficult for the majority of people. Wages were low, and the rich elite kept a tight grip on politics. But by the 1930s, you could feel the pressure building, with a population booming, a worldwide Great Depression hitting hard, and new ideas about workers' rights spreading. People finally said, enough, which brought about the labour disturbances of 1937. This outcry forced major changes, leading to the creation of strong political parties that fought for the people. From that point on, the power shifted, inch by inch. So, in 1950, the moment everyone waited for arrived. All adults, regardless of how much money they made, got the right to vote. Then, just over a decade later, in 1961, Barbados was granted full internal self-government. They were finally running their own show. And the grand finale of it all? On November 30th, 1966, led by Errol Barrow, Barbados became a fully independent nation. What a journey from an empty island to a free, proud republic, right? And speaking of journeys, it's about time we explore this beautiful country. Because there's one special quality that makes Barbados unique, and it's that it sits way out on its own. Most of the neighbouring islands you think of, like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, are part of a curving chain called the Lesser Antilles. But Barbados, it's an outlier. It's sitting all by itself in the southeastern Caribbean Sea, about 100 miles or 160 kilometers east of the main island arc. It's also the closest island to Europe and Africa, which, as we saw, had a massive impact on its history and made it a major trading link for centuries. So, how big is this tiny paradise? It's pretty tiny but perfectly formed. It's roughly triangular and measures about 21 miles or 34 kilometers long from top to bottom, and only about 14 miles or 23 kilometers across at its widest point. That gives it a total area of just about 166 square miles or 430 square kilometers, which means you could literally drive the entire length of the island in about an hour. Here's the coolest part about its geography though. Most of those other Caribbean islands are volcanic, but Barbados is a coral island. Picture this. Millions of years ago, a massive layer of sedimentary rock formed deep underwater. Then, as the island slowly rose out of the sea, it got capped with a layer of gorgeous, chalky coral, which is the main reason why Barbados is relatively flat and less rugged than its neighbours. Now there's one exception to this beautiful, gentle landscape: the Scotland district in the northeast. This area covers about 15% of the island, and here, erosion has completely stripped away the coral cap. What's left is a dramatic, rugged, and windswept coast. It's stunning to look at, but a word of advice: the currents there are super dangerous, so swimming is a big no-no on most of those east coast beaches. Instead, stick to the calmer sides. As you move inland, the island rises gently into rolling hills. It's a pretty easy climb, with the highest point, Mount Hillaby, only reaching about 1,120 feet, or 340 metres above sea level. You won't find any towering peaks here. Instead, the interior is covered in lush sugarcane fields and dotted with villages and old plantation, great houses. And where does everyone live? Well, the population is densest along the west and south coasts. That's where you'll find the stunning hotels, residential neighbourhoods, and the capital city, Bridgetown. Bridgetown, located along Carlisle Bay, is the largest city. Plus, it's the main seaport and the heart of the country's business. And what about the weather? It's exactly what you dream of for a tropical getaway. The constant trade winds blow in from the west all year long, acting like a natural air conditioner. Temperatures usually hang out between the low 70s Fahrenheit, or about 22 degrees Celsius, and the mid-80s Fahrenheit, or about 30 degrees Celsius. And they only have 2 seasons: a dry season from early December to May, and a wet season for the rest of the year. Oh, and another thing to keep in mind: Barbados sits on the edge of the Caribbean's hurricane zone, and while direct hits aren't frequent, they can be devastating when they happen. And while Barbados sounds like the perfect getaway, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Because for this next section, we're taking a look at its political and economic landscape. So, if you were to peek into the political halls of Barbados today, you'd see a very powerful and unified government. The current Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, is leading a very strong administration. Her whole focus right now is delivering on an economic recovery and meeting some big financial goals like reducing the national debt. That brings us right to the money part of the story, and honestly, the economy of Barbados is looking just as strong. In the first half of 2025, the economy saw a solid expansion of 2.5% from its $7.17 billion GDP in 2024. And this momentum is projected to keep going, with the full year's growth expected to hit around 2.7%. Looking beyond 2025, it's forecasted to sustain an annual growth of about 3%, which honestly can be attributed to a few key factors, including an influx of foreign money and, as always, tourism. Tourism is still the main engine, no doubt about it, because during the first half of the year, Barbados saw a total of 394,675 arrivals. And get this, more than 90% of that jump came from just one place, the United States. So naturally, this boosts everything else like hospitality, transportation, and entertainment. But Barbados isn't putting all its eggs in one basket. They're also making major moves to secure the future. And here's what I mean. First, the construction sector is booming, with huge projects planned for new housing, infrastructure upgrades, and building renewable energy installations. Second, the government is making a huge push to go digital. Think modernising the entire economy, streamlining business, and even aiming for a full digital payment system by March 2026. This move is making it easier and easier for new international companies to set up shop here, attracting more foreign money than ever before. Now, yeah, so far, everything Barbados is doing economically is pretty impressive. But wait until you get a load of their financial security, because this is where the country truly shines. And let me tell you why. They've built up a massive, high-tech safety net. Their international reserves are at a record high, which is enough to cover over 9 months of imports. Think of that as a huge shield protecting them from any nasty global shocks, like a sudden spike in oil prices or a downturn in a major economy. Not only that, but they're also being responsible with their own bills. They have a goal to bring the national debt down to 60% of their GDP by 2035 or 2036, which honestly is a huge undertaking. And what about the prices of things? Well, they're managing inflation really well. The annual rate is expected to stay low, stabilising between 1.7 and 3.5%. That keeps money in the pockets of the Barjan people and keeps confidence in the economy high. Now, when you put it all together, you see an island that isn't just surviving, it's thriving. Barbados is confidently moving forward, securing what looks like a very prosperous and stable future. And with such a positive environment like this, it begs the question, how are the people and culture here? Well, the culture here is a tapestry woven with threads of its British past and, most powerfully, its African heritage. And you can hear that mix the moment someone speaks. Because while the official language is English, the locals use the Barjan dialect when they speak. It's this rapid-fire musical accent that can be tricky to follow at first. They have unique slang that sounds natural to them. For example, instead of saying the plural you, they might say woona, and the often becomes d, replacing the th sound. It's pretty mesmerising to listen to, even though you might get lost in translation sometimes. And language isn't the only cool thing about this place, because that unique flair carries straight over to the food. Barjan cuisine is all about comfort and flavour. Because they're an island, seafood is the way to go. And you can't talk about Barjan food without mentioning the flying fish. It's such a staple, and often served with a cornmeal and okra mixture called kuku. Besides that, other must-try dishes are savoury fish cakes, spicy pepper pot, and the rich pudding and sauce. One thing to keep in mind here is that Barjans love their flavour, so if you enjoy food on the hotter side, you're in luck, because spices are everywhere. Now, food is one thing. If you want to see all this Barjan life in action, you have to hit the festivals. Barjans are a happy, celebratory people, and they have some of the best parties in the Caribbean. The most famous event is Crop Over. This is a multi-week summer festival that marks the end of the old sugarcane harvest season, and trust me, it's a non-stop party. It showcases local arts, crafts, and tons of music, all culminating in the spectacular Grand Kadooment Carnival Parade, where everyone rocks these amazing, brightly coloured costumes. It's absolutely incredible. You'll hear all kinds of music at these parties, especially calypso and reggae, but listen closely for the sound of a touk band. This is a uniquely Barjan tradition, paying homage to the old British military bands, but with a vibrant African twist. They use a bass drum, a kettle drum, a tin flute, and a penny whistle. So if you hear a touk band on the streets, you know it's going to be a major celebration. Speaking of celebrations, they have one for their national food, the annual Barbados Food and Rum Festival. In November, international chefs team up with local talent to show off the amazing Barjan culinary scene, with local rum distilleries providing the perfect pairings. There's also the week-long Oistins Fish Festival, celebrating the country's strong fishing heritage. But of course, we can't wrap up culture without mentioning one of the biggest names to ever come out of the island. Rihanna. Born and raised in Bridgetown, she is a global superstar who introduced the world to major hits like Umbrella, Diamonds, and so much more. Oh, and did you know she was also declared a national hero when Barbados became a republic in 2021? But going back, if you had to try one Barjan specialty, either the famous flying fish and cuckoo, or a taste of that legendary local rum, which one would you try first? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, you're going to love this next one.